Namaskar, this is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. This weekend, India scored 2 victories over Pakistan. One at the United Nations General Assembly and another at the Asia Cup. We'll bring you the highlights of both. Meanwhile, Pakistan is trying a new move. It is wooing Donald Trump with promises of rare earths. In Europe, the war is spreading. Russia has bombed Ukraine for 12 straight hours. And European capitals are working on a drone wall to protect themselves. In Washington, the drama of a government shutdown is back again. Also, their no-war president is sending dangerous signals. Will Donald Trump attack Venezuela? We'll look at the build-up. In North Africa, Morocco has erupted in protests, and here too, it's a Gen Z march. Back home in Tamil Nadu, a stampede has claimed 41 lives. We'll discuss India's crowd crisis. Also a story on Durga Puja pandals and why a Trump statue is featuring in some of them. And on World Heart Day, how do you make every beat count? All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Massive protests erupt across Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Civil society groups had called for protests over the denial of fundamental rights. Phone and internet services have been partially shut in the region. The protests reportedly are the largest in recent history. US President Donald Trump hosts Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Trump wants Israel to agree to a Gaza peace proposal. The US President has presented a 21-point plan to both sides to end the nearly 2-year war. But Netanyahu wants to completely eliminate Hamas before agreeing to any truce. India and Bhutan approved their first ever rail connectivity projects. This is a milestone in bilateral relations and economic cooperation. 2 new lines have been cleared, aimed at boosting cross-border trade and regional integration. India is Bhutan's largest trading partner. A huge communications blackout hits Afghanistan weeks after the Taliban began severing fiber optic connections. The authorities claim it is to prevent vice. This has effectively shut down high-speed internet in several regions. And Moldova's pro-European Union ruling party celebrates its poll victory, accusing Russia of attempting to influence the vote in Moscow's favor. Moldova, which borders Ukraine, is a candidate to join the EU. The country has long been divided over whether to move closer to Brussels or maintain Soviet-era relations with Moscow.
Excellencies, we have won the war.
Having a neighbor that is an epicenter of global terrorism.
The plight of the Palestinian people.
The arena may change, the players may change, the stakes may change, but the outcome never does. When India and Pakistan face off, the result is certain. It is India that wins. And we saw that over the weekend. It was 2 days of heightened India-Pakistan tensions, first on the diplomatic stage at the United Nations General Assembly in New York, then on the sporting stage at the Asia Cup in the UAE. And both times, India secured the upper hand. We'll start with the diplomatic takedown. You may remember the Pakistan Prime Minister's address on Friday. It was as delusional as it gets. Shehbaz Sharif claimed victory over India. He called Pakistan a victim of terrorism. Hours later, India responded. Unlike Sharif, the Indian diplomat did not thump the table. She did not have to, because New Delhi relied on facts. On how Osama bin Laden was found in Pakistan, on how their military officers attended funerals for terrorists, and how their air bases were left smoldering.
This assembly witnessed absurd theatrics in the morning from the Prime Minister of Pakistan, who once again glorified terrorism that is so central to their foreign policy. However, no degree of drama and no level of lies a country long steeped in the tradition of deploying and exporting terrorism, has no shame in advancing the most ludicrous narratives to that end. Let us recall that it sheltered Osama bin Laden for a decade, even while pretending to partner in the war against terrorism. The Prime Minister of Pakistan also advanced a bizarre account of the recent conflict with India. If destroyed runways and burnt-out hangars look like victory, as the Prime Minister claimed, Pakistan is welcome to enjoy it.
Less theatrics, more facts. That was India's strategy against Pakistan. But the takedown was not done yet, because on Saturday it was India's turn to address the General Assembly. Foreign Minister Jaishankar delivered India's address, and once again the difference was stark. Shehbaz Sharif dragged his bilateral grudges to the United Nations General Assembly. He named and complained against India, but Jaishankar did not. His speech focused more on India's worldview, on things like climate, energy, UN reforms. Basically, India spoke like a world power. Pakistan spoke like an obsessed, toxic neighbor. Even when Jaishankar spoke about terrorism, he did not name Pakistan, but he made sure that his message was clear, that terror would not be tolerated.
India has confronted this challenge since independence, having a neighbor that is an epicenter of global terrorism. For decades now, major international terrorist attacks are traced back to that one country. UN's designated lists of terrorists are replete with its nationals. When terror hubs operate on an industrial scale, when terrorists are publicly glorified, then such actions must be unequivocally condemned.
The contrast is there to see. On Friday, Sharif spoke about Kashmir. He talked about so-called Indian atrocities there. Maybe that's what Sharif calls elections and investments, atrocities. Meanwhile, look at the scenes in POK, that is Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, the portion of Kashmir that is illegally held by Pakistan. Look at the situation there. Tens of thousands have hit the streets in protest. They have shut down shops and roads. Do you know why? For the most basic of things. The people in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir cannot afford electricity or flour. They're seeking subsidies on both. Other complaints include resource theft. Basically, POK's resources are being drained to enrich Islamabad, yet Shehbaz Sharif has the audacity to complain about India. Like I said, totally delusional. But there's a saving grace. All this humiliation was happening at the UNGA, so chances are Pakistanis were not tuning in to watch. IMF or World Bank, different story, but UNGA, maybe not the same level of interest. However, the same cannot be said of what happened on Sunday. That's when the Asia Cup final happened. India took on Pakistan in Dubai. The men in blue had beaten Pakistan twice in this tournament, so the final was the third encounter, and this one was a lot closer. Pakistan batted first. They posted 146 runs on the board. In reply, India started off badly. We lost 3 wickets inside 4 overs, but then came a massive recovery. It was led by Tilak Verma, who scored 69 runs. If you saw the match, you know how tense it was. It's hard to beat that sort of drama. But minutes after the win, that's exactly what happened. You see, the Asia Cup is organized by the Asian Cricket Council. That's Asia's top cricketing body. And right now, it is led by a man called Mohsin Naqvi. Does the name sound familiar? It should, because he is also Pakistan's Home Minister. So Team India refused to take the trophy from him, from the Pakistani minister. This led to some strange scenes in Dubai. When the confetti went off, India celebrated without a trophy. Some players posted pictures later on social media. Since they did not have the trophy, they used emojis instead. Now, I know what you're wondering. Where did the trophy go? Well, Mohsin Naqvi stormed away with it. We're not making up any of this. The Pakistani minister took the trophy back to his hotel. The Indian board has now lodged a protest. They're asking the trophy to be returned. I guess there is petty, and then there is Pakistan. The fact is, we need to get that trophy ASAP. If not, Pakistan will start saying that they won the cup. But jokes aside, this weekend was very revealing. It confirmed two major truths. One, the gulf between India and Pakistan, whether in diplomacy or in cricket, we are not peers anymore. The emotion may give that impression, but the reality shows this. India is far, far ahead. And number two, our strategies are different too. At the UNGA, Shehbaz Sharif resorted to theatrics. He thumped the table and spread falsehoods. But India remained poised and firm. At the Asia Cup, same story. Pakistani players mimicked falling jets and hurled abuses, but India, we registered our protest with poise. We informed in advance that we would not shake hands after the match. Frankly, Prime Minister Modi summed it up best. He posted this message after India's win yesterday. Operation Sindoor on the field. Outcome is the same. India wins. Now let's talk about Pakistan. For decades, Pakistan came to Washington with the same pitch, security partnership. That's what they wanted. First during the Cold War, then during America's infamous war on terror. But that currency has depreciated. Pakistan has been caught playing double games too many times, so security partnership does not sell anymore. Which is why Islamabad is now trying a different approach. Rare earth minerals. And it's tailor-made for Donald Trump, because if there's one thing Donald Trump likes, it is the idea of digging riches out of the ground. Recently, Pakistan's leaders were at the White House, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and the country's real leader, Army Chief Asim Munir. They were both in the Oval Office. They met the US President. They also had a conversation with American officials. And among the pictures they released was this one. It shows Asim Munir with a box of rare earth minerals. He's showing them off to Donald Trump. The US President looks quite interested. After all, rare earth minerals are crucial for modern life. From your phone screen to fighter jets, electric cars, even wind turbines, everything depends on them. China dominates the supply of rare earths. Washington is desperately hunting for alternatives, and this is where Pakistan comes in. Islamabad claims it has a rare earth treasure.
Pakistan has a rare earth treasure. With this treasure, Pakistan's debt will also be reduced, and Pakistan will soon be counted among the most prosperous societies.
But does Pakistan actually have rare earth reserves? Geologists think Pakistan might have huge reserves. Copper, gold, maybe even rare earth elements. But none of it is proven. The US Geological Survey does not even list Pakistan as a known source. Here's what we know right now. Balochistan has copper and gold reserves. It may also have rare earth minerals. And the focus is on the Reko Diq mine. Asim Munir thinks it can generate $2 billion in revenue annually. $2 billion. Talk about manifestation. Then there is Waziristan and Gilgit-Baltistan. These regions too are believed to hold critical minerals. All of this is untapped right now, and that's because of a number of reasons. The first is the landscape. It is rugged, uninhabited. It does not have a lot of human population. The second reason is insurgency. Attacks by militant groups and protests have rocked these areas for years. And the third is lack of money. Pakistan never had enough investments to explore its wealth, also because it's hard to believe their claims. You see, Pakistan once claimed to have discovered a massive oil reserve. Turned out to be a lie. In 2019, then Prime Minister Imran Khan announced a massive find offshore. But nothing happened after that. So right now, Pakistan's pitch is more promise than proof. But I guess in diplomacy, sometimes a promise is enough. And this is right up Trump's alley. Here are some of the things that Donald Trump loves: gold, branding, and deals that let him say he is beating China. And this one, Pakistani rare earths, ticks all the three boxes. Trump gets to say that America is securing minerals without Beijing. He can boast about bringing jobs and investment. Because for the US president, this is not just about rocks, it's about optics. And to sweeten the deal, Pakistan has signed an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, with US Strategic Metals. This is a Missouri-based company. The deal is to ship out ready-to-go minerals like copper and antimony, build a refinery in Pakistan, and bring in $500 million of US investment. I know it sounds big, but US Strategic Metals is not exactly a mining giant. They mostly recycle old batteries. Analysts say this looks more like a trading deal. And yet for Pakistan, the American stamp of approval is what really matters. But here's the problem with all of this. Investment in Pakistan is like a black hole. It sucks in promises, and nothing you throw at it ever comes back. You don't have to believe us, just ask China. They invested billions of dollars in Pakistan, and what did they get? Wells of debt, ghost towns of promises, and their own citizens being attacked. So there are two big ifs in this story. First, do those rare earths exist in the first place? And for a moment, let's assume that they are real, that they do exist. There are huge reserves of them. Then the second question is, who will pay the bills? Who will pay for the extraction? Who will invest in the infrastructure to get these minerals out in the first place? Islamabad has no answers for it. All it has is a box of rocks. So Pakistan's offering at this point looks shiny in the photo op, but when you zoom out, it's the same old bluff. Islamabad can pose all it wants with boxes of rare earths, but in the real world, it is still selling empty promises. It was just after midnight in Kiev when the skies lit up. Air raid sirens howled across the city. For the next 12 hours, Ukraine just endured. It was one of the largest Russian aerial assaults since the war began. Nearly 600 drones and almost 50 missiles, they were fired from Russia. They struck almost all Ukrainian cities. Ukraine's air defense managed to shoot down a lot of them, but plenty still got through. A cardiology institute in Kiev was hit. Residential blocks collapsed. A 12-year-old was killed when a missile tore apart her home. 3 others were killed in the attacks, and at least 80 people were injured. By dawn, firefighters were hosing down charred cars. People were sweeping up shards of glass. One missile hit the Belgorod power plant, forcing a blackout.
Да ну нахуй! Разъебывают, пидорас! Да ну нахуй, пизда, Бурыч, смотри! Охуеть! Куда мы попали? Вот это аттракцион, блядь! Да ну нас остановили!
It was a brutal reminder for Kiev. Even after 3.5 years, the war continues to affect daily life. For Ukraine's President Zelensky, the timing was no coincidence. You see, these strikes coincided with the UN General Assembly in New York. And at the UNGA, the UN General Assembly, Moscow insisted that it does not target civilians. Yet hours later, Kiev was in flames. Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, called the attacks vile and cowardly.
Basically, during these weeks when the UN General Assembly was ongoing, Russia literally using every day, every hour for strikes on Ukraine. Very mean strikes. And this is what defines Russia, what they are doing and not what they are saying or spreading across the world via various means. They rejected all realistic peace proposals and deserve really tough pressure.
But why now? Why is Russia striking Ukraine right now? There are 3 main theories to explain this. Number 1 is leverage before winter. Russia has long used energy as a weapon. Europe is bracing for colder months ahead, so cutting power grids with missile strikes is Putin's old playbook. The second thing he's trying to do, perhaps, is to test Ukraine's new defenses. Remember, Kiev is getting the Patriot missile system, so Russia may be probing for weak spots. How many drones can Ukraine shoot down before its Western-supplied batteries run dry? This attack is meant to test that. The third objective is sending a signal after Trump's U-turn. As you know, Donald Trump is now Ukraine's new cheerleader. He thinks they can still win. In fact, he's pledged $90 billion in new US weapons. So with these latest strikes, Moscow is sending a message to Trump.
We also expect strong moves from the United States of America. We spoke with President Trump about what can really nudge Russia towards a change of their position and stop the war. The world has means which could work to bring peace about.
So what are Ukraine's options? Well, right now they're playing defense. Zelensky is quietly negotiating what he calls a mega deal for US weapon systems. Meanwhile, Ukrainian strikes are also intensifying. They're targeting Russia's energy infrastructure. They're targeting Russian oil terminals and refineries. And it's not just Ukraine that is on the edge here. It's also the rest of Europe. In the last 3 weeks, Russian drones and jets have violated the airspace of 3 NATO countries: Poland, Romania, and Estonia. And this weekend, Denmark was on high alert. Drones were spotted over its largest military base. 3 large drones were also spotted at the Copenhagen airport. So now Europe wants to establish what they're calling a drone wall. It will be located on its eastern flank, Europe's eastern flank. 10 nations were involved in this discussion. NATO was present as an observer. Ukraine too was invited to participate. After all, Ukraine is a drone manufacturing hub. It can produce up to 4 million drones in a year. It wants to export these drones, and it's looking to exploit this opportunity.
Ukraine proposes to Poland and all our partners to build a joint, truly reliable shield against Russian aerial threats. And this is possible. Ukraine can counter all types of Russian drones and missiles. And if we act together in the region, we will have enough weapons and production capacity for these. If Russia loses the ability to strike in the skies, it will be unable to continue the war.
So what happens next? More than 3 years into the war, Moscow is not looking for an off-ramp. It still has missiles to fire and oil revenues to bankroll them. And Ukraine still has allies. But neither side is winning. And the war is expanding. Europe is getting dragged into it in more ways than one. This is not just Russia versus Ukraine anymore, if it ever was. It is now entering European territory. Officially, the US has 4 seasons: spring, summer, fall, and winter. But unofficially, there is one more, a season that comes every couple of months: shutdown season. And it's here. Once again, the US government cannot decide its budget. So once again, a shutdown is looming. Let me explain. In America, the fiscal year starts on October 1st. Which is the coming Wednesday. And a new fiscal year requires a new budget or a new funding bill. No bill or budget equals no money to spend. And right now, that's where things stand. Donald Trump's Republican Party has proposed a spending bill, a budget. The American Parliament, or the US Congress as they call it, has 2 bodies, the House of Representatives and the Senate, and both must pass this bill. Now, Trump and his team can easily get the budget passed in the House because the Republicans have a majority there. But the US Senate is a challenge. You need 60 votes to pass, and the Republicans only have 53 votes, hence the deadlock. And the Democrats are not budging this time. They're demanding more funding for public health care. If not, they will not pass the bill. Again, no bill means no money. On paper, it's a terrifying situation. If the government does not have money, it cannot do anything. It cannot pay federal employees, it cannot run parks or museums, it cannot even pay the military. But, like I said, that is on paper. Most times, America manages to avert this shutdown. After all the drama, they reach a deal. Will this time be the same? Well, today is a crucial day. Trump has invited congressional leaders to the White House. The top 2 Democrats and the top 2 Republicans, they've been invited. Their goal is to find common ground. But the tensions are high. And Trump has put the blame squarely on the Democrats.
The radical left Democrats want to shut it down. I mean, it's up to them. We have a great economy going. You saw the numbers yesterday. They're fantastic. The economy's doing well. Prices are down. We have virtually no inflation. Everything's going good. We're respected by every nation in the world. And you know what happened? The Democrats want to shut it down.
But the Democrats are not backing down. They have struggled to stay relevant in recent months because Trump is dominating the news. Yes, not all the news is good, but it's Trump's face splashed all over it. So this time, the Democrats are standing firm. If the government shuts down, it wouldn't be Trump's first time. He had 3 shutdowns in his first term as president. The first shutdown lasted 3 days. The second one lasted a few hours, and the third one lasted 35 days. That remains the longest shutdown in US history. It cost the economy around $3 billion. So could we see a repeat this time? If we do, it could be a lot worse because the US economy has already been hit by tariffs and inflation. The last thing it needs is another jolt. But this whole drama also raises another question, a very fundamental question about the United States of America. For decades, it's been the fulcrum of the global economy. The safest debt, just buy American bonds. The most lucrative market, sell in America. The most reliable currency, just buy some dollars. But all of that is changing before our eyes. Let's look at the debt first. When governments or companies want to borrow money, they can issue bonds. Lenders can buy these bonds and get interest in return. The US issues treasury bonds and companies issue corporate bonds. Usually, these corporate bonds carry higher interest, and you can imagine why. Which one is more likely to go bust, a government or a company? Naturally, a company. Therefore, corporate bonds carry higher interest rate. But there are some blips now. 2 Microsoft bonds are trading below the treasury yield, meaning they carry lower interest than US government bonds. Even top funds are bullish about them, like Vanguard. They feel tariffs and inflation could hit the US economy, therefore they're keen on corporate bonds. Even if short term, this is a big change. Next, let's look at the market. The US market was always a price target. A, it has a high per capita income, and B, it's bigger than its European counterparts. If you could capture the US market, you could make millions. But that too is changing. Trump has imposed steep tariffs on imports, so most countries are looking at alternatives. For example, India is seeking deals in Europe. And finally, third point, the dollar. The dollar remains the top dog as things stand, the US dollar. But the challenges are mounting. More countries are using the euro, the yen, and the yuan. And it all circles back to the very same problem we started with, the lack of clarity. Just think about it. The US makes up 26% of the global economy, but the whole thing could shut down tomorrow. In what world is that okay? Same with market access. One day, there are 2 to 3% tariffs. Next day, there's 50% tariffs. How do manufacturers and countries prepare for it? And we're not saying things will change overnight, but the signs are all there. By the end of Trump's term, he could accelerate these changes, pave the way for a de-dollarized, de-Americanized global economy. The United States has a new enemy, number 1. It's not Russia or Iran, it is Venezuela. The US is planning to attack Venezuela with drones. The US media says the strikes could begin in a matter of weeks. The US government says the targets are drug traffickers and drug labs, the ones that operate from Venezuela. Nonetheless, it will be an attack on another sovereign nation. So will this trigger a new war? Also, why Venezuela? To understand that, let's pull up a map first. This is where Venezuela is located, on the northern coast of South America. For most of the 20th century, it was known primarily for one thing: oil. And this tied them deeply to American energy needs. But then politics got in the way. In the early 2000s, Venezuela became a thorn in Washington's side, and it got worse in 2013. That's when Nicolas Maduro took over as the president of Venezuela. The US accuses Maduro of authoritarianism, sham elections, human rights abuses. Maduro accuses the US of imperialism. And so every few years, tensions flare, and right now, Washington may be planning an attack, ostensibly to strike drug cartels, those that move cocaine and other narcotics across the Caribbean into North America. Trump has dispatched 8 warships and a nuclear-powered submarine. They are in the waters of the southern Caribbean. In the last few weeks, the US has struck at least 3 Venezuelan boats. The attacks killed around 12 people. Washington accused them of carrying narcotics. President Trump said they posed a threat to Americans. But there's no proof of any of it. And Venezuela is not buying the American line. In response, thousands of Venezuelans have joined a civilian militia. Many have taken part in weapons training. They were held at military barracks and in neighborhoods. President Nicolas Maduro says this is not about drugs, this is about intimidation, maybe even regime change.
The denunciation of this attempt to bring war to the Caribbean and South America in order to promote a regime change that would allow them to steal Venezuela's incalculable oil wealth and so forth out of Venezuela. The Venezuelan people love peace, and that is why they are always ready to defend it. Threats, lies, nor cannons do not frighten us.
For Venezuela, this feels like history repeating itself. The US has a long record of intervening in Latin America, sometimes directly, sometimes through covert operations. Maduro's government argues that the real goal is not to bust cartels. It is to destabilize and eventually topple him. And this is not an outlandish fear. Washington has already tried the maximum pressure approach in recent years. They've imposed sanctions. There have been oil embargoes, recognition of an opposition leader, Juan Guaido. But none of it worked. Maduro is still in power. And then there's the China factor. Beijing is making deep inroads in Venezuela. It is the top arms supplier to Maduro. It is also propping up the country's crumbling oil industry. Nearly 90% of Venezuela's crude goes to China. Over the last 2 decades, Beijing has lent Caracas more than $60 billion. When tensions spiked, Maduro turned to Xi Jinping for help. He requested Beijing for assistance. And that makes it a headache for Washington. The US has long tried to keep China out of the Western Hemisphere. And under Donald Trump, that push became unmistakably aggressive. There were some attempts at de-escalation. Maduro even wrote a letter to Trump. He offered to help Trump hunt Venezuelan gang leaders. But the US president was not interested.
We have seen this letter. Frankly, I think there were a lot of lies that were repeated by Maduro in that letter. And the administration's position on Venezuela has not changed. We view the Maduro regime as illegitimate, and the president has clearly shown that he's willing to use any and all means necessary to stop the illegal trafficking of deadly drugs from the Venezuelan regime into the United States of America.
But here's the thing. Striking boats in international waters is one thing. Striking inside a country, that to a country like Venezuela, that's a whole different ballgame. Because there's sovereignty, international law, potential civilian casualties, and the risk of dragging the US into a broader conflict. So this is no small decision. Which brings us to the question, what happens next? American warships are lurking in the region. So the next few weeks are going to be crucial. Will it be a quiet show of force or a full-blown crisis? I guess we'll have to wait and watch. Another day, another Gen Z protest, this time in Morocco. This is a rugged country in North Africa. It is home to about 38 million people. And compared to its neighbors, it has remained relatively stable. But now Morocco is on the boil. Youth-led protests have rocked the country. Over the weekend, hundreds of demonstrators took to the streets, clashing with the police and reportedly leading to more than 100 arrests. But when it comes to Gen Z protests, Morocco is not alone. From Madagascar to Peru, from Nepal to the Philippines, we've seen the same script and the same fury. So what's behind the so-called Gen Z march? Here is a report.
Stadiums are here, but where are the hospitals? This is the question that Moroccan Gen Z asked this weekend, as hundreds of youth-led protesters took to the streets and clashed with the police in the North African country's largest anti-government protest in years. Morocco is co-hosting the FIFA World Cup in 2030 with Portugal and Spain. It will also host the Africa Cup of Nations later this year. This has become a big priority for the government. It has been pouring big money into the sporting events, building 3 new stadiums, renovating and expanding at least half a dozen others. And amid this, people say public infrastructure is no longer a focus, especially the country's healthcare system, which is struggling. There are only about 8 medical professionals for every 10,000 people. Recently, 8 women died giving birth in a public hospital in Agadir, a large coastal city south of capital Rabat. This incident has shocked the nation and fueled people's anger. Now, Moroccans are denouncing what they call the government's misplaced priorities. Over the weekend, they demonstrated outside hospitals in at least 11 cities, including Rabat and Marrakesh. And the government cracked down. Police in plain clothes and riot gear disrupted the protests, reportedly physically assaulting the protesters and arresting dozens. According to reports, more than 100 arrests were made in Rabat alone, but tensions haven't defused yet. Gen Z, or those typically born between 1997 and 2012, says that their discontent remains alive and well. And this is not good news for the government. Morocco heads to polls next year. Youngsters make up the largest share of the population, and they are visibly unhappy. In the past, protests in Morocco were driven by unions or political parties. But this is being called a leaderless movement, where the protests were publicized on social media platforms like TikTok and Discord, which are popular among teenagers and gamers. If this sounds familiar, that's because it is. Morocco's youth says that it has drawn inspiration from what happened in Nepal recently, where youth-led protesters channeled their anger over lack of opportunities, corruption, and nepotism, all while making TikToks and coordinating on Discord. And these are hardly the only such examples. Take the ongoing protests in Madagascar, for instance, where thousands of youngsters are raging against water and power cuts, calling for the government's resignation. Over the weekend, protests flared up in Peru. Police and young anti-government protesters clashed in the capital, Lima. Demonstrators marched to express their anger over corruption scandals in the country, triggered by a pension reform passed earlier this month under which young people will be required to pay into a private pension fund, in what has also been dubbed Gen Z March, a name that can also be given to the recent demonstrations in the Philippines and Indonesia when tens of thousands of youngsters voiced their discontent against the government. So as youngsters topple governments while making TikToks or set nations on the boil with social media anthems, one thing is clear. The so-called unserious Gen Z is not afraid to use its voice, and governments can no longer afford to ignore them.
Let's turn to India now. We saw a horrible tragedy this weekend, a horrible and avoidable tragedy. It happened in the town of Karur in Tamil Nadu. A massive political rally, a sudden crush and a deadly stampede that killed 41 people. It is not a new story in our country. Unfortunately, crowd control is a hit or miss in India. This year alone, stampedes have killed 90 people, 90, which makes you wonder, where is the problem? Let's look at what happened in Karur. On Saturday, the town was decked up for a massive political rally. It was led by Tamil actor turned politician Vijay. His party expected 10,000 people to turn up. But the actual turnout? Over 27,000. Take a look at the sheer scale of it.
Anna. அடுத்து
So where did things go wrong? The Tamil Nadu police have filed an FIR and it makes 3 major revelations. One is the crowd size. Permission was given for 10,000 people, but more than 27,000 showed up. The second is the delay. Vijay was slated to turn up by noon, but he took the main stage only by around 7 p.m. The FIR says this was done deliberately, basically to create more fervour and expectation. But that also meant that people were tired. They were exhausted and thirsty after standing in the heat. And the result was this: many of them fainted. And finally, the FIR makes a third revelation. It blames Vijay's party for egging on the supporters. Apparently, many of them were made to sit on tin roofs and trees. Those roofs collapsed and the trees broke. Again, same result. The people below were suffocated and crushed. As of now, the death toll is 41, and that includes 10 children. The Tamil Nadu government has announced compensation for the victims. It has also ordered a special probe. The end goal is to create a new set of rules and guidelines, sort of like a playbook to avoid stampedes. But here's the problem. This is not limited to one state or one politician. It happens all over India. Just look at the incidents this year. In late January, there was a stampede at the Mahakumbh. 30 people were killed, 60 others were injured. In February, there was a stampede at the Delhi railway station. 18 people were killed. In the month of May, there was a stampede in Goa. Multiple people were killed at a religious gathering. And then in June came the Bengaluru crush. Fans of IPL team Royal Challengers were caught in a stampede. At least 11 of them were killed. The official numbers paint a worrying trend. There have been 4,000 stampede events in the last 3 decades. Since the year 2000, they have killed more than 3,000 people. Like I said, this is avoidable. This is not some sudden earthquake or flash flood. This is totally man-made. The question is, why do they happen so frequently in India? And how can we stop it? Well, stampedes are not unique to India. They happen elsewhere too. But our country has a lot more people, so any gathering tends to be bigger and more chaotic. Another problem is the arrangements. Big crowds require 3 things. 1, adequate infrastructure, which includes barricades, drinking water and loudspeakers. 2, responsible organizers. If you say 1,000 people will come, only 1,000 should come. If the crowd swells, your arrangements will not be enough. Also, stick to the plan. We saw that in Bengaluru and Karur. The event did not stick to the planned schedule. And finally, number 3, responsible attendees. Be alert about the crowd size and nature. Be aware of exits and rules. And if you're not confident, at least don't bring your children. Now, I know what you're thinking. We mentioned organizers, we mentioned attendees and infra. But does the government get a free pass? Well, quite the opposite. It is their duty. It is the government's duty to enforce these conditions, to prepare and plan for the worst. Which is why accountability is so important. In Bengaluru, the IPL team was named in the FIR. In Karur, the party office bearers have been named. And this is one case where politicization is welcome. If people have made mistakes, they must be called out, whether it's an actor, a cricket team, a local official, an organizer, or the state government. Because these victims deserve justice. They're not political or cricketing fodder. They are people with families and dreams. Punitive tariffs, visa fees and trade barriers. US President Donald Trump has targeted India again and again over the past few weeks, and now his political storm has earned him a special mention in a Durga Puja pandal. Durga Puja is a massive festival in India where millions of people honor the Hindu goddess Durga. During this, people set up makeshift pavilions known as pandals. They feature idols of the goddess prevailing over the mythical demon Mahishasur, to commemorate the victory of good over evil. But now a pandal has portrayed this with a geopolitical twist. It has depicted Donald Trump as the demon, in what many are calling Trumpasur. But what is the US president doing in a pandal, and how has Durga Puja taken its grand installations and turned them into social commentary? Our next report tells you.
Walk into a pandal and the heady scent of the blooming shiuli flowers, the woody notes of incense, and the earthy smell of clay idols is unmissable. For many in India, it is a signal that the Hindu goddess Durga is home. Every year, millions of people honor her and commemorate her victory over the mythical demon Mahishasur. With a 5-day Durga Puja festival, this is the most important religious celebration for Hindus in eastern India. The region comes to life every year as if jolted with elaborate rituals, fan-favorite food stalls, and of course, the larger-than-life pandals. These are elaborate, colorful, makeshift pavilions. They feature handmade idols of the three-eyed goddess Durga with her 10 arms splayed out, clutching a spear and a club, embodying the victory of good over evil. But over the past few years, the pandals have morphed from traditional works of art to pavilions of socio-cultural messaging. For instance, this year, in West Bengal's Beharampur city, the demon has been modelled after US President Donald Trump, with the frowning face, the on-brand hairdo, and a surprisingly fit body, which may be a bit of a stretch. But that aside, this idol is not just about creativity and humor. It is also a reflection of grievances and tariff tensions. And this is hardly an isolated instance. Last year, after a rape case in a Kolkata hospital shook the nation, pandals shed light on the issue, portraying Durga's idol with a face covered in shame, near a statue of a woman with a doctor's coat and stethoscope. The year before that, a pandal tried to combat societal taboos about menstruation. This year too, Kolkata has turned into an art gallery with social messaging at its front and center. There are themes ranging from food adulteration to acid attacks. As rivers shrink and climate change rattles the world, pandals are focusing on global warming too. One pandal is using 2,000 clay pots to convey simple traditional habits of conserving water. But apart from focusing on social issues, pandals are also talking about literature, textiles, even futurism and artificial intelligence. Durga Puja pandals are a smorgasbord of impeccable concepts and intricate craft. This festival is a sight to behold, and no wonder that it is widely described as the world's largest public art festival, recognized by the UNESCO, or the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, as an intangible cultural heritage. And to top it all off, many pandals are crowd-funded, and the festival is an economic boon to the country, especially the eastern region, contributing billions of dollars every year. So historically, Durga Puja may have started as a religious phenomenon, initially performed only by the rich and influential, but today it is a cultural and social juggernaut, where faith and craft come together to form a breathtaking spectacle.
Before we begin our last story tonight, let me ask you a question. What is the leading cause of death in our world? No, it is not wars, guns or tanks. It is not famine or natural disasters either. It is heart disease. That's right, heart disease is the world's #1 killer. In the UK, a person dies from heart disease every 3 minutes. In the US, every 34 seconds. And in Southeast Asia, one person dies from heart disease every 8 seconds. So cases differ from country to country, but heart disease accounts for 13% of all deaths the world over. Yes, we know this is not a very joyous start to a new week, but we are telling you this because today is World Heart Day. It is an opportunity to ignite global conversations, to boost engagement and to talk about our heart. It is about the size of your fist, the heart. And it is the hardest working organ in the human body. The heart pumps about 5 liters of blood through your system every minute. That's more than 7,000 liters per day. It is quite the workload, which is why the heart takes a beating over our lifespan. It grows weaker. On top of this, other risk factors hurt it further, like diabetes, alcohol and tobacco use, unhealthy diet, stress, poor sleep, and the lack of physical activity. So over time, the heart function becomes compromised. And this is known as cardiovascular disease, heart disease. It is a group of diseases or disorders affecting the heart and blood vessels. And this is a chronic disease, meaning it is persistent. It is long-lasting, much like cancer and diabetes. Now, according to a new Lancet study, the deaths from such chronic diseases have been declining. About 80% of countries, home to more than 70% of global population, have seen a decline. So the progress is undeniable, and this is mainly tied to medical improvements. Faster diagnosis, better treatments, a widespread adoption of drugs, all of it has contributed. Patients who are hospitalized for a heart attack today face much better odds of surviving, because medicine is faster and better than ever before. And this is unquestionably good news. But heart attacks are still killing millions of people because major challenges still remain, and it has a lot to do with how we look at the problem. First of all, we think it only ails the elderly, which is no longer true. Research shows that the risk of heart disease is rising with each new generation. And younger people are increasingly falling prey. For instance, here in India, between 2020 and 2023, half of all heart attack patients were below the age of 40. Half. Secondly, heart disease is still seen as a man's illness. The fact is, it is the leading cause of death for women globally. Yet, compared to men, women are more likely to be misdiagnosed, undertreated, and underrepresented in research. So, in order to improve prevention, we need to change our outlook. But apart from clinical intervention, we also need greater policy efforts, like better regulation against tobacco and junk food marketing. We as individuals can also do better. Yes, modern life is not doing our hearts any favors. We lead overwhelming lives. Stress is a regular feature. Plus, we sit too much, more than 9 hours a day on average. We don't eat too well. More than half our plates are filled with junk food on average. We do not exercise enough, and we don't sleep as much as we should. So yes, it's a long list of problems, and it can be tough to stay healthy. But we have to try. Because 80% of all cases of cardiovascular disease are preventable. 80% of all cases preventable. And this cannot happen in isolation. To protect every heart, we have to work together. Because every effort matters. Much like every heartbeat, every measure counts. They say winning is a habit, but not for Pakistan. Their cricket team takes inspiration from their army, so losing, not winning, is their habit. The men in green pulled a lot of antics in the tournament. They complained against the ICC referee, they threatened to boycott a match, they mimicked falling jets, all for what? To lose 3 times to India in 1 month. But if you're Pakistan's captain, do not worry. In fact, congratulations. In your country's long-standing tradition, you will now get a promotion. Maybe not a field marshal, but at least test match captaincy.
One reason for Pakistan's Asia Cup defeat.
We prepared for Sharma this time, but Verma came out of syllabus.
Now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Typhoon Boalo rips through Vietnam, killing at least 8 people. Smoke rises above Namibia's flagship national park as wildfires spread, and the Indian Army launches Vayu Samanvay to sharpen counter-drone operations. Finally, we are taking you back in history. On this day in 1938, Germany, Italy, Britain and France established the Munich Agreement. The agreement was aimed at appeasing Hitler. It allowed the Nazi annexation of Czechoslovakia's Sudetenland. We leave you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Excellencies, we have won the